It's good to see you. Thanks very much for being here. What does this inflation report mean to you?
Number one, Maria, I look at how this works in the mid and long term. And I heard you talking earlier about how the markets are going to react. We're $30 trillion in debt, number one. Every 1 point rise in interest is $300 billion worth of more interest for this place. It does no budgeting, really no appropriating that all of us participate in. So it's going to be bad for the federal government more than anything. And there Biden was bragging about everything just yesterday. That was bad timing. I don't know how anything could be worse when the market's ticking down on the other side. So
yeah, the market was reacting to the hotter than expected inflation number. But you just mentioned debt. The Committee for a Responsible Budget says that the administration has added nearly $5 trillion to deficits over the next decade. He says that the stock market selling off doesn't really matter. He was taking a victory lap. It was a tone-deaf victory lap, I agree, celebrating this so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Here's a bit of that yesterday. Watch.
This bill alone is going to lower the deficit by $300 billion over the next decade. This bill cut costs for families, help reduce inflation at the kitchen table, because that's what they look at, how much of their monthly bills and how much do they have to pay out for their necessities.
He says it's real, Senator. Your reaction?
So what amazes me about the other side of the aisle, they're political enterprisers by nature, but then when they try to sell you something that obviously is not the case. I mean, they could not have been more embarrassed by the fact that they were saying that and the market tanked the way it did yesterday. This is all not just a bellwether. It is something that we're going to deal with. Look back in '81 when we were here last. Took 5 years for Volcker to get inflation from where it is basically now down to 2%.
Yeah.
Compare that to the economy we had pre-COVID. They ought to be all booted out of office for taking one of the best economies we ever had through COVID, shutting the productive side of the economy down, creating all the genesis for what we're dealing with now, and then trying to spin it otherwise. I mean, that's crazy.
I mean, you would think this is resonating on people, and yet there's a real tight race in the Senate going into the November elections. Why?
Well, I think it's because we on the other side of the aisle are a little reticent about making the case. If we can't articulate this into political good news in both chambers, not only the House, which I think we're going to get, we need to go to some type of remediation school on how we communicate. This should be a slam dunk. It's all on their back, and here they are bragging about it, even having somebody come in and sing praises about the whole thing.
Yeah. I
mean, it's ludicrous, and here we need to hold them accountable. We need to do a better job at it.
Senator, I want to get your take on the Joe Manchin, Chuck Schumer bill. Are they going back on their promises in terms of energy in Manchin's state? Where does that stand? Is it happening that we're going to see $80 billion go to the IRS and 87,000 new IRS agents? Will this play out, or can you and your colleagues stop it?
Sadly, that will play out because we can't stop it. That is already forward momentum. And until we win back one chamber this November, which puts a tourniquet on craziness like that, we have to deal with it. That could be taken to court because it's an executive order, maybe. And on some of this other stuff, like the student loans, for instance, that's inflationary. That is part of law, so I don't know how that's going to play out. We're going to be borrowing the money to pay for it. That needs to be another thing we litigate and explain why it doesn't make sense. That's the part that we've got to do better.
Well, you're trying to fund the government right now. The House and Senate leaders working on legislation to fund the government past September 30th, likely until mid-December. The White House is requesting an extra $47 billion in emergency funding for COVID, monkeypox, and Ukraine. Will you be able to do it? What does the next few weeks look like?
So the CR has gotten to be kind of the political football because we do not do any budgeting. And remember, last year, we didn't get the job done until February. For the year ended in September, the year before. So that dysfunction is going to continue forward. That's where you need true reform. I'm on the budget committee. Bernie Sanders is the chair. We've not done one meeting on the mechanics of budgeting. And this stuff all falls in our lap with people behind closed doors dropping it in where it's a huge bill with a day or two to size it up. And that will happen again. Maria, it's all part of where this place is headed, along with the $30 trillion in debt. And Biden had the gall to put a budget out there that puts us $45 trillion in 10 years.
Well, this is not very encouraging. It's quite discouraging, Senator. Is there anything else you'd like to say in terms of where America is headed?
Well, the optimism I have is you still have each state that you go back to, that you represent. Indiana, we have balanced budgets. We live within our means. We have a rainy day fund. Maybe this place needs to start looking at the states that actually make government work.
All right, Senator, we'll keep following that. Thanks very much. Mike Braun is in D.C. this morning. Thank you, sir. Quick break.